Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, a very good morning to all of you. It's my first time in Israel, and definitely it's not going to be the last one. When we were heading to the hotel on the airport, we were exploring the city, me and Mr. Rahman and the driver. And we noticed how the Ethiopian government is keen on beautifying the streets to reflect the cultural legends that the Ethiopian nation has. These statues, the memorials, the name of streets, all of them were introducing us to the achievements, to the legacy and resilience that the Ethiopian nation had throughout their history. Well, the communication is so important and imperative as hard to mutual understanding. I've been to many countries, to be honest, from Asia to Africa, from Europe to North and South America. The number of topics that has increased in all those countries was amazing. I'm coming from the Middle East, and I think all of us heard and read about the war that we witnessed in our region. I don't know about this who's wrong and who's right, but there is one that needs to be highlighted, which is the repercussions on world economy. Why does it make the effect on world economy? It's because of connectivity, it's because of the globalization of economy. It's because of the cooperation that was built to maximize interest between each other. Thus, this session will concentrate on one of the most important aspects of connectivity, which is infrastructure and ports developments. So we hope that we come up with solid insights from our distinguished speakers to help our countries to amplifying their efforts when it comes to building a brighter future for our nations. With that, I would like to start with the Dولة. Can you tell us what are the political infrastructure and the connectivity gaps that must be addressed to unlock Africa's trade and economic potentials?
Well, thank you for the organizers of this forum for giving this opportunity to say a few things. And in the case of Africa in general, and more particularly Ethiopia, the question of connectivity is very critical. And of course, as currently landlocked country, Ethiopia faces critical challenge when it comes to connecting whatever resources, whatever products it has with the international global supply chain. So the use of ports, the use of rail links is quite critical as far as we're concerned. And of course, the amount of huge investment it requires means that it cannot be undertaken without bringing partners who have a better potential to invest easily than Ethiopia or other African countries. So anything that would help elevate the connectivity problem, especially in the case of the use of ports, efficiency, and rail links, and other related infrastructures such as dry ports and cold chain facilities that are quite critical. And of course, it requires some kind of partnership with people who can afford than we in Africa currently are. But Africa, as an untapped market which has a huge potential, can be greatly assisted by such investments. And of course, these are some of the areas which I believe we should focus on. And any partnership, including that of the UAE, should concentrate on addressing such kinds of issues. Of course, the UAE being very much interested in the development of ports and related infrastructure, the UAE's involvement will come definitely handy. It will not only help in addressing the critical challenges that we face, but also it will contribute to a larger trade volume for the UAE itself, and of course, diversification of its supply chain. And I think these are areas where we should concentrate on. And of course, Ethiopia currently is working with the UAE in the development of Berbera and the corridor and the related links, infrastructural links between Berbera and Somaliland and Ethiopia would go a long way in addressing some of the critical challenges we continue to face in this country. Thank you.
How can accelerate the mutual cooperation between Ethiopia and the UAE? How can we bring the private sector closely and make things accomplished?
I think, the first order of business for Ethiopia is to make the business environment attractive here. And we are striving towards that. And as you have rightly pointed out in your introduction, Ethiopia is undertaking huge infrastructural projects, not just urban beautification projects, but also creating opportunities for citizens and creating opportunities for investors to come here and tap into the growth potential this country has. And like I said, the first order of business is for Ethiopia to improve its business environment. And the fact that we are now working on digitalizing services, making it easier for people to do business. Registration of businesses would have taken, sometimes unbearably long time, but the kinds of progresses we are making towards that simply means it will be a whole lot easier, for example, for investors from the UAE to come and invest here. So making the country attractive. The potential is huge, the potential is there, but unless you work on the business environment, at the very least, unless you work on, say, acceleration or facilitation of registration of businesses, that would be a very tough call. So yeah, these are areas we are investing in so that Ethiopia becomes attractive to investment.
Digitalization is really important nowadays. One of the things that we heard once we came to the airport, we took sample the driver, that he told us that he reached our center through ChatGPT. He told us that he's using the ChatGPT in marketing, and once you pay a lot, you get more feature in order to maximize your customers. Now let me go to the aspect. What is the driving? Lots of people are talking about the UAE's ambitions and UAE's plans when it comes to the international market. So what are the main strategic, economic, and geopolitical drivers behind the UAE's ambition to become a global logistic hub? And how does Africa fit into this vision?
Good morning, everyone. First, Mohammed, if I want to contextualize my answer, yesterday we had a really great discussion with the IFA and its amazing team. We talked about a lot of issues. One of them was the main issues that really defined the global supply chain. And I think we agreed on this point, which is the global trade over the past decade has entered a new era. Era is defined by one strategic thing, which is the global competition to secure more resilient and stable global supply chain. And I think the catalyst for that is two major economic events. The first one is the pandemic in 2020, and the devastating economic consequences it caused on the global supply chain. And this is basically what resulted in a lot of international initiatives. It goes with a few examples such as the IMEC and the Development Road and, China, BRI. I know some of them they date back, a few decades ago, but I think the acceleration happened in those projects was because of the pandemic and, how countries were, heavily exposed to geopolitical shocks. The second catalyst, I'd say, for those initiatives is the closure of the Strait of Hormuz. What happened? I think it was something that really brought all countries into one idea that it has to be collective effort by all countries. Because bilateral kind of relationship won't really stabilize the global supply chain. And I think what happened with the Strait of Hormuz is a stronger proof of that very idea. In the previous session, the speaker, he emphasized on, Adam Smith's ideas and thoughts of, free market and open economy. And I think even, the world's largest economy, the United States, when they, through the Liberation Day, when Donald Trump announced those tariffs, I think what happened, the economic consequences that followed his decision proved that, countries need each other to secure a global supply chain. So this is basically the whole idea that really drives, the Emirati government to invest heavily in logistics and in global supply chain. And I think Africa as a continent, and maybe the Horn of Africa in particular, they have a lot of potential. And it's, if you look at it, it has, what the UNCTAD once described it as the trio economic growth of Africa, which is basically the demographic resiliency and the strategic natural resources. And the third thing, which I hope the United Arab Emirates would really capitalize on, is the AFCFTA, the African Continental Free Trade Area, because this agreement unleashes massive unified consumer market. And if, any country would be able to capitalize on that, then, a huge market would be, open for them. So this is, I think, the reasons why the UAE is interested in investing in a global supply chain. And again, with Africa and, with the international initiatives, and the trade corridors and the economic corridors that just been put into place and discussed, I think, we're going to, and we're heading to that direction.
Again, first, speaking on the list from our users to you guys. So, although you guys are right, how can ports, economic corridors, and special economic zones be better created to develop regional value chains and attract manufacturing investments?
Thank you very much. I just want to start by saying that when we read the development history of every country, those advanced countries, their development journey is directly related with the amount of investment that they made on the infrastructure sector. So the investment that they made on infrastructure on the other. So when you invest on infrastructure, on one side, you create integration amongst the people of your own country. On the other side, it helps you to attract more investment from abroad, and it is the supply chain. So when we see the investment, infrastructure investment in the Horn of Africa or in Africa, in general, in developing nations, first of all, Africa is, latecomer in terms of connectivity and in terms of infrastructure. And second, even though we are latecomers, now there is a tendency to look for investment on connectivity, and even policy priorities are being given for connectivity in Africa. Why? Because there is an understanding among policymakers, decision makers, that unless there is an investment on infrastructure, it's difficult to attract more investment to lift your people out of poverty. So it is in this sense that when you see, for example, East Africa in general, which is a home for more than 45% of African population, which is growing very rapidly. Again, the economy is rapidly growing in East Africa. So this means unless you invest a lot on infrastructure, it's difficult to sustain the amount of growth that we are experiencing in this part of the continent. So working on connectivity, especially on infrastructure that connects those maritime ports with those capital cities and investment destination areas and agricultural potential areas is a must if we have to sustain the growth momentum that we have today.
One of the comments that we heard while we were coming, that some Ethiopian people are complaining from the infrastructure projects. So what are the plans that are being taken from the Ethiopian government to persuade the Ethiopian people about the feasibility of those infrastructure and the need of it in order to improve their future?
I don't think the complaint is about if
They are aiming on their houses and their units.
Yep. Let's talk about two types of infrastructure. Those infrastructure built on in urban areas like in Addis, in the megacities, in other cities, and major infrastructures that are connecting the center of the capital with ports and those different cities. So the government is now making huge investment and trying to connect Addis Ababa with major cities around the country. And new roads are being built, even railway is being built. So this is, as a citizen by myself, I understand all these are being done for the benefit of the economy and for the benefit of the people. And when we see the renewal of the city, this is another aspect of the infrastructure. I think at the beginning of this renovation project, practice, as you said, people fail to understand the possible outcome or the possible impact of the projects. But now, after we see the changes, I think people are showing some positive attitude to the performances that the government is making concerning this renewal of the city. I think with this, Mr. Getachew may reflect a lot.
Yeah, well, look, there always is this conflict dynamic that emerges as a result of introduction of infrastructural projects. While you undertake infrastructural projects, which will ultimately be the best interest of the people, well, there would definitely be individual complaints. As long as you have to make way to a highway that is going to be built, you have to make way to it, and that requires demolition of houses. And obviously, demolition of houses would not necessarily sit well with people, individual, but ultimately, at the end of the game, as long as the government undertakes this responsibility in a manner that takes into account the individual rights of the people, but at the same time, with a view to improving the lives and livelihoods of the population, it will ultimately sink in. And I know there would be individual complaints here and there. I know there could be, yes, yeah. I mean, as long as all the legal requirements are met, individual complaints would ultimately give way to public satisfaction. So what matters is whether the government sets its eyes on actually achieving the objectives of improving the lives and livelihoods of people. And of course, investment in critical infrastructures is quite important. And of course, as he has rightly pointed out, even in the so-called corridor development projects in the major cities, people now seem to realize how good it is. What matters is whether the government is ready to extend all the services that it is providing in major cities to other areas as well. And as long as you create that expectation, as long as you continue to work hard to meet that expectation, ultimately people would see the benefits of what you are undertaking. But it requires commitment, it requires a sense of responsibility on the part of public officials to do what they do in a matter that meets the expectations of their people.
Understood. I'll tell you a secret. I'm a big fan of the job, That's why I was keen on preparing some spicy questions for him. So when we were going to mountain yesterday, you said that you have a class where you teach about Arabic. So I have a question. How can UAE expertise in ports, logistics, regions, and trade facilitation support Africa's regional integration and economic transformation regions?
Thank you. I think to understand how we can help Africa or how Africa can be part of our growth story, I think it is a win-win. We shouldn't be looking at it as a one-way traffic. It's a two-way traffic, and that's how it could be a transformative model. We need to really understand the new world. The new world is, going through a big churn. It's a flatter world, and I think we need to tap into that flatter world now. We need to make sure that the phase of superpowers becoming less powerful and middle powers becoming more powerful is well tapped into through the process of South-South cooperation. And I think that's where the UAE-Africa story really comes in. And it's also a world where geoeconomics is influencing geopolitics. We just talked about it a while ago. Maybe the war started due to geopolitical reasons, the recent war, but it definitely ended because of geoeconomic reasons, because of the closure of Hormuz and because of the impact that it was having around the world. So I think it's important to recognize that. And this is where I think the whole process of connectivity really comes in. I don't think we need real lessons now to understand how important connectivity and infrastructure is. And I keep saying this line, cash is no longer king, but connectivity is king. More connectivity projects around the world, more trade, economies grow, and for that we need more connectivity projects. All that is part of the new currency of economic competitiveness. We were just talking about the importance of infrastructure. I remember a line that was posted on the Indian transport minister's wall, which said that US has good roads, not because it is rich. The United States is rich because it has good roads. So that used to be the story of the past. Perhaps United States is not doing as well today because its infrastructure is crumbling, right? And there are a lot more infrastructurally developed states around the world, be it the Chinas, be it a host of other countries. And now that's become the mantra for growth. You need to have connectivity to grow. And I think this is where the new concept of corridorization is coming in. I think the world is witnessing an era of corridorization. That this is just in terms of, we keep, talking about one or two corridors. Look around the world and you see the number of corridors that there are. Everybody talks about the Belt and Road Initiative, but look at the number of corridors that come up thereafter. The UAE, for example, is not just part of the Belt and Road Initiative, it's part of IMEC, the India, Middle East, Europe Economic Corridor, which can be actually, extended to Africa. It's part of the Development Road Project, which connects Turkey, Iraq to Europe. And there are a host of other European and American projects that have come in. We are now talking in terms of how Saudi Arabia is trying to connect with other countries through Syria. So there are a number of corridors. Essentially, why we are looking at this era of corridorization is because global economy is growing. One of the factors we often keep talking about is chaos doesn't lead to growth. But actually, the last 25 years have been quite chaotic. And yet we have seen the global GDP triple in just 25 years. And whether or not the next 25 years is going to be chaotic or stable, economies have to grow because populations are growing. Look at the number of deaths versus look at the number of births. And just explosion of African population. Even if you have to just provide the basic necessities to Africa, the economies will grow within Africa, and trying to help Africa, UAE and the Gulf and the global economies can grow as well. And just connecting the dots makes connectivity very important, and we'll see more and more of corridorization. Where does the UAE come into play? I think it's essentially in terms of recognizing Africa as a growth potential. In 2000, The Economist magazine ran a cover story saying, hopeless Africa, hopeless continent. But by 2012, something had changed. Economist ran another cover story which said, hopeful Africa, Africa, a continent of promise. So I think the world is recognizing that, and we should stop blaming, systems that are not functioning well, but appreciate the systems that are working well to have led this far. I come from India, and we often joke that Indian economy grows at night when the government is asleep. So you don't have to take it literally, but the fact is that the government is only an enabler. There are a lot of other things that are happening on the ground which helps, economies grow. And the UAE model is something that Africa can learn from, because we too started from perhaps where Africa is, looking to take off. Our economy was extremely small. We've grown roughly about 1,000 times in the last 50 years in terms of our GDP in the UAE. And that has happened basically because of our connectivity projects. We're a country of just about 11 million people in the UAE, but we are helping move about 110 million people annually through our airports. So that tells you a story, and one leads to the other. And I'm not even talking about ports. So the way we need to look at is how can you develop an economy using your core expertise, core resources to also branch out into infrastructure projects in terms of connectivity projects, and see how these growth of ports, airports can be connected to building of warehouses, supply chain mechanisms, movement of goods. And I really appreciate the conversation that was made during the earlier panel, where it should be not about movement of raw materials, but movement of semi-finished, and there should be value added to everything that's done in a particular country. So I don't think we need to exploit resources anymore. We need to think in terms of adding value to resources in its home ground and then moving along the chain and being the connector more than anything else.
Being the connector. Linking. Start from this point. And I want to correlate with the digitalization. So what role can digital infrastructure, smart logistics, and emerging technologies play in improving connectivity, trade efficiency, and supply chain resilience?
Well, it's quite obvious. I think the fact that we are now in an era where we cannot do without smart technology simply means that whether we like it or not, we have to embrace those technologies. And the kind of inefficiency that has been creating bottlenecks in trade, facilitation of trade, congestion of ports, in fact, lack of efficient clearing and all that can only be addressed through digitalization, of course, through smart technology. Tracking shipments doesn't have to require that. You're not expected to track shipments manually or through the use of people's expertise and all that. So essentially, logistics is one of the most difficult bottlenecks that any country that wants to facilitate trade could face. So anything that helps in facilitation of logistics, anything that helps in facilitation of the import or export of goods, and if it happens in a manner that addresses the bottlenecks, and of course that would be a more than welcome development. Then countries at this point in time cannot do without digitalization, including of course registration, all the kinds of services that the sort of connectivity we are talking about requires. So whoever has access to ports, whoever is interested in exporting or importing goods, should always count on the relevance of this modern tools, no matter how difficult it could be for some of us, whether we like it or not. This is an era that requires huge investment, but investment worth taking. And I have reason to believe that with more and more investment, people, even the Ethiopian government is putting more and more efforts to that end, because that's probably the easiest way to handle these issues than expecting the old system to work. And it's not going to work, because ultimately connectivity to the world also requires that being on par with developments with the rest of the world. So working with the UAE, the mega hubs in the UAE like Jebel Ali, without introducing a level of sophistication in digital technology, smart technology, would be an exercise in futility. So that pretty much speaks for itself.
Okay, what about AI? Embracing AI. What's the Ethiopian government vision when it comes to AI and utilizing it in those kind of projects?
Well, I will tell you this. I know the Prime Minister is very much obsessed with the use of AI. He's not only obsessed with the use of AI for leapfrogging, but more importantly, he has a plan to launch an AI university, which will be the first of its kind in Africa.
University in Africa.
Yeah. And this is a vision. He has already launched a task force to set up an AI university, and the government is investing tons of money to that end. Although it's not my area to have an expert explanation of what that involves, but I know for a fact that as a policy instrument, the focus of the government on AI is quite commendable. And of course, this initiative of the Prime Minister to establish an AI university has been announced in Parliament, has been preparations are already underway, and the budgetary allocation has already been earmarked, and it's my hope and expectation that it will come to fruition anytime soon, probably in a matter of a few years.
Well, we have a university back in UAE. It's called Mohammed University for AI. So maybe we can link you guys with that.
I would hope so, yeah. With the close relations with the UAE and the Ethiopian government, I think that's a distinct possibility.
Let me go back to Mr. Rishbabi. Mr. Rishbabi, why is a significant share of UAE investments in Africa concentrated in energy, food security, and logistics? And how does this align with both the UAE's strategic investment and Africa's development needs?
First of all, Mohammed, despite the historical underinvestment in Africa, and what some economists call the GDP paradox, Africa as a continent, consists of over than 50 countries. They account of maybe 20% of the global population, but they only represent 2 to 3% of the global GDP. Yet the UAE views this as a great opportunity for capital allocation, rather than a threat or a structural failure. Now, why the UAE is investing heavily in Africa? I think we just my colleagues they touched on the reasons why Africa is an attractive place for investment. But I do think we have to maybe break down the main three sectors that the UAE invests in Africa. The first one, we have the food security, and we have energy. Not only energy, but more importantly is a clean energy. And I think these two sectors really shows the UAE belief in Africa as an economic strategic partner. Because, we are talking, about the UAE as a country that imports 90% of its food. So when you invest in Africa, you really, build this, resilient, kind of supply chain that really goes from Africa to the Emirates. Now, the third economic sector that the UAE invests in Africa is, of course, beside the food security and structural natural resources is logistics, of course. And what really goes without maybe a realization is that the UAE has been investing in Africa for more than 4 decades now. I know Africa is a strategically crowded continent when it comes to competition and trade competition, but the UAE has been investing in Africa for nearly 4 decades now. And this is through its state-owned companies, namely DP World and AD Ports. For instance, just yesterday we mentioned one example, and I would like to re-emphasize on it more now. I guess it's really something that I think the UAE ambition in Africa truly redraws the economic landscape in the continent to an extent. Just before the UAE arrival into Africa, the cost estimated to pick up a container from Mombasa or Dar es Salaam was up to $10,000. This is all the way to Rwanda. But after the UAE arrival, it's been cut down to $2,500. Not only that, but even the time was cut down to from 14 days to 48 hours. So this is massive, economic impact that the UAE is doing in Africa. And when it comes to, why the UAE is a desirable trading partner, I think it's really based on one strategic thing, that the UAE is not only, merely financing projects. What the UAE is doing is providing and offering comprehensive package of three main things: design, capital allocation, and the most importantly is operational excellency. The UAE, I think, in many ranks and in many indices, has been ranked as, a top country when it comes to operational excellency and similar, ways in how we materialize, projects and initiatives. So, in my opinion, yeah, I do see the UAE investing in these three main sectors for these reasons.
What's the secret behind the UAE's successful operations?
Again, I think it goes back to the deep belief from the Emirates that Africa is a strategic economic partner. So we are not investing in Africa to as the panelists just highlighted to exploit raw materials. But we do invest in Africa to achieve this mutually beneficial kind of relationship between the Emirates and Africa. So when it's this win-win situation for the UAE and for the African countries, I think will be in a good terms when it comes to all aspects to our relationships.
Okay, let me go back to the spicy questions, Dr. Janab. So, Dr. Janab, I want to go to the macro level. How can UAE-Africa cooperation strengthen maritime connectivity across the Indian Ocean, Red Sea, and the Atlantic trade route, while ensuring sustainability, resilience, and long-term economic impact?
I think the first thing we need to understand is that in the new world, connectivity is not just about physical infrastructure. Connectivity is about digital connectivity, it's about space connectivity, it's about energy connectivity, it's about food connectivity. All these dynamics are involved. So that itself throws open the opportunity for us to collaborate and for Africa to play the role of the connector that I was talking to you about. It's also important for me to just highlight a few of my own personal opinions in terms of how we need to approach AI, because we talked about technology. Technology is a great enabler, because many decades ago when I was cycling to school in the 1980s, I saw a writing on the wall which said, "Don't feed computers, feed hungry stomachs." Basically, there was a movement in India too. Just like there are people criticizing infrastructure growth in many of the developing countries now, Indians too were criticizing the tech model of growth in India. But if they didn't move along that chain, India wouldn't have been an IT superpower. So there is value in moving along the tech chain. Where I have a reservation is about emphasizing too much on AI. I think we shouldn't be adopting models of the Western countries in the developing countries in the South. AI is not an answer to all the problems in the developing world. We just heard from one of our economists in the last panel that 600 million people in Africa don't have access to electricity. Well, roughly half the world still doesn't have access to electricity. What are we talking about AI? So we need to find low-tech and middle-tech solutions in this age of high-tech. High-tech is important for economies that are already doing well, but I think many other countries need to utilize low-tech and middle-tech solutions to many of their problems and linking that to the high-tech world that we are already beginning to see. So there is value. Rather than ape the models that are being pushed, we need to come up with our own solutions to our own problems and try to connect the dots. So I think if we put all these sort of things into perspective, we will be able to connect ourselves better with the world. And if we become those connectors, the question that you asked me will be answered to a large extent, because I think they're all connected. Maritime security is part of that whole idea. If we're going to have more and more movement of goods along the waterways in the future, because that still is the cheapest way of transporting goods. We don't have alternative ways of transporting goods cheaper than through waterways. So non-traditional security comes into play, where piracy comes into play, trying to play around those sort of difficulties and hurdles is where cooperation will also come into play. So today when we talk of connectivity, we are not only talking about the physical movement of goods or energy or food, but we are also talking about the enablers that make that possible. For example, one good example I can give you is the farm to ports project that the UAE and India is doing now for the last decade or so. So UAE cannot buy land in India. It instead invests into producing food products that are ideally suited for its market. But along the way, what they also are doing is building a network of roads, railways, warehouses, and bringing it right up to the port. And the port is already operated by Dubai Ports World. So you see, that's why it's called the farms to port sort of thing. So we talk of food security, but it's also in return for what the UAE does in terms of providing energy security to India. India is providing food security to the UAE. So this is the sort of model that we need to look at. Food security for energy security, farm to ports project. These are all transformative, win-win, non-exploitative, ideally suited for the strengths that each of these countries or continents have, and that's what we should be looking at moving forward.
Can anything concentrate on ensuring, which is the big power rivalry, and achieving those kind of goals in Africa? How can the UAE or big power work on those kind of bigger projects and in, let's say, with the conditions that are happening between three powers? I don't know if but giving you a good rest.
Look, today, as I started my conversation earlier, I don't think the big powers are really as influential as they were in the past and as we make them out to be. The middle powers are far more stronger, influential. They have capital, they have the connectivity projects, they have commerce going on between and among them, they have collaborations going on much better. I can just give you one example of how we've come up with a new concept called work-arounding. You work around this superpowers imposing themselves on us. You work around the sort of problems and hurdles that they may create for you. And in the tech space, for example, middle powers have their own ways of work-arounding the superpower competition and rivalry. And between 2021 and 2025, we've seen roughly about 200 tech deals that have been signed between and among middle powers. So it's that sort of a model that we need to adopt because middle powers are not gung-ho about projecting their political power. They are more concerned about the economic dynamics rather than the political dynamics. And as a result, they can find sweet spots to go about collaborating. They're willing to compete, they're willing to cooperate, they're also willing to compromise. I think that's the big difference between several of the middle powers and small powers when you compare them with the big powers. And this is exactly where countries like the UAE, Ethiopia, or global South countries can further their South-South cooperation because they don't have a political agenda at the end of the day. They are looking to push their economies forward because they're all under tremendous pressure politically from within, not from elsewhere. Their own societies are demanding change because today, that's why I said it's a flatter world. The whole world is, being seen in your living room. Everybody is so well connected with the world. They see the world moving forward. They want to be part of that transformative change as well. So governments are under pressure to make those changes. And it's not so much political, but it's the economic dynamics that are going to retain them in power if they're going to have political systems which are looking for people's support to move them forward.
Okay, let's find out global South. So, what role the Ethiopian can play when it comes to the African Union level, and how can it make the mega projects successful through having regional cooperation and integration in Africa? Sorry.
Okay. When we talk about African Union, we have project, what we call it, Agenda 2063. I will come to that later. But first of all, let me talk a little bit about what infrastructure connectivity in general needs. First, it needs political coordination among different states, because when talk about this infrastructure connectivity, it's not a type of investment which you can invest like by going somewhere. You need to communicate with governments of different nations. For example, when UAE came and invested in Berbera, I think UAE didn't only consult with the government in Berbera, they also consulted with the government in Ethiopia, because we are also the beneficiaries of those projects. So to have such type of projects, first of all, you need to have some type of political coordination. For example, India and UAE are now doing a lot. Why? Because they have graduated from political differences. They have done a lot in political coordination. And then next to that, you need to have like policy coordination or something, project coordination. I think that's what African Union is now trying to do. By designing Agenda 2063, it tries to identify possible projects that can be. It's because the 100th anniversary of the African Union, and maybe it's by assuming that at this time we have financial limitation, we have technical skill limitation, then over the long period of time we will have accumulated knowledge, accumulated finance, and global investment will also shift into Africa. So it's better to stretch than to make your vision very short term and then fail and fail and fail again and again. So with this Agenda 2063, the AU is trying to coordinate African nations to connect capital cities like Addis with Kenya, with Uganda, Entebbe, or some other African countries. I think this is very important effort that AU is trying to do. So African Union is thinking that the global south, basically Africa, can by itself design a project and can attract an investment on that, and can possibly also implement a project which is as large as continental scale.
Dr. Rado, do you have any remarks on the African Union?
Yeah, well, I think your question was with regard to what Ethiopia can play both as a member of African Union and, of course, as the diplomatic hub and the capital city of African Union itself. Ethiopia will have a critical role. The question of Agenda 2063 is not one of waiting until 2063 to develop. Whatever we can do right now, have to make sure that by the year 2063, Africa will have achieved all the objectives that any developed continent will have. So whatever it takes, including, the most critical aspect of Agenda 2063 is infrastructure integration, regional integration. And Ethiopia plays a critical role. Ethiopia works on highways that links it with Kenya. It provides electricity to Kenya, to Sudan. Even now, while the conflict in Sudan is raging, Ethiopia still provides electricity to Sudan. Now, through infrastructural integration, you can expect whatever conflicts used to plague the continent would somehow be addressed. And of course, infrastructural integration goes a long way in addressing such kinds of conflicts. So Ethiopia's focus is it develops dams which can provide electricity to its neighboring countries, including Kenya and possibly Tanzania. And it also builds highways that connect it to neighboring countries. And of course, if every country remains true to its commitment as part of the African Union, and this agenda will have been achieved sooner than wait until 2063 comes. And I think Ethiopia is one of the most critical players in this regard, and it is a government policy it's a matter of public record that government invests significantly on infrastructural projects than other countries in Africa in comparison. Thank you.
I agree with you. I think, yes, commitment is the key to make any project successful. Unfortunately, we ran out of time. I was really enjoying the discussion with our speakers. Join me, ladies and gentlemen, in a round of applause to our speakers for the
And